everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, hosted by HRDQ-U and presented by Tayna Longino. My name is Sarah, and I'll moderate the webinar today. The webinar will be about an hour, and if you have any questions, you can type them into the questions box. We'll be answering these questions as they come in live at the end of the presentation or in an email if we do run out of time. Tayna Longino is the president and founder of HR Partners, an interview strategy firm. Today's session is sponsored by HRDQ and features a theory from their popular negotiating style profiles. This classroom training program helps individuals develop their collaborative negotiating styles through thought, preparation, and skill practice. Using a research-based self and feedback assessment, negotiators will identify with one of their negotiating styles. Stay tuned for a special offer on the NSP after the conclusion of this webinar. Thank you, Tanya, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Sarah, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me and Sarah and everyone else for enhancing your negotiating powers. I first want to apologize for the delay in us getting started, so hopefully you're able to hang in there with us for the duration of our time here today. During the duration, we will go through the phases of negotiation. We'll talk about your negotiating style, your individual style, and we'll take a look at which style works best in different situations. And we'll also talk about how to collaborate and maintain good relationships while you're negotiating, which is very important. Those who have joined me before know my humor for Dilbert. And Dilbert's state of negotiation, as you can see here at the table, they're talking about the flexibility of negotiation and how you're being a good sport. And ultimately, what we find out is not just being a good sport, I'm just being a good loser. Some people might call it generous. So you see that negotiations, when you take a look at the state of it, there's some not such great feelings. There's one person that feels like they've done a great job, and the other's feeling very much like, you know what, I didn't do well at all. So let's take a further look here. When it comes to negotiation, many people feel like they are not on top of their game, whether it be asking for a raise or closing a business deal. More than 40% of U.S. employees just don't feel confident in their negotiation skills, while a quarter admits to never having negotiated ever in the workplace. And just according to a simple survey that was done online by LinkedIn, this study reveals that men feel more confident about negotiating than women, with 37% of males feeling self-assured in their abilities, comparing just 26% of the females that took the survey. However, a key takeaway is that many people don't feel confident when they're negotiating. Let's take a look at the definition for negotiation. It's an interactive process for which two or more parties seek to come to a mutual agreement. So what's important here is that definitely you need two or more parties, and you also have to have some commonality for an agreement. The best outcome for both parties would be a win-win situation. While we understand that that's not always the case, but that would be the best outcome. I'm going to take a moment to ask you to participate in a quick poll just to see, for our listeners, how frequently do you negotiate while at work? If you take a moment and just in your chat box off to the side, the right side there, okay, a couple more seconds. good. So I see we have quite a bit. Looks like, yeah, you see our results there. So 33%, 36% frequently, sometimes, a couple say never, and just a few of you say all the time at work. So let's look at that. That's pretty consistent with the survey too that we just did. Next slide, please. So given what we just saw in the survey, what makes negotiations so challenging? Individuals are not just ready, they're not ready to understand the second party at all. There's a lack of time. We lose patience in the back and forth. There's a lot of last minute changes that happen sometimes in negotiations. We're not as prepared as we'd like to be or that we should be. And there are times when communications break down. It might lend itself to some criticism and some sarcasm, sometimes derogatory comments being made during the process of negotiations. And some just see negotiations as being just too rigid. And all of those lend themselves to just a lack of confidence. So today we're going to look at some of the areas that we can work on today. The preparation. How do we mitigate being too rigid? And how do we shore up our confidence? Those are some areas that we're going to cover. The importance of negotiation in business can't be overestimated. In your career, you want to keep your career advancing and moving forward by capitalizing on the advantages of negotiation. You want to negotiate for long-term success in your career, whether it be in your role or your salary or a particular deal that you're working on. You want to be successful in that. One of the first objectives we'll cover today is understanding the different phases of negotiations. And for our purposes, there are 4 phases. Every negotiation involves different players, interests, and goals. And despite those differences, most negotiations follow the 4 phases that we have shown here in the slide. Once you understand the process and the strategies for each phase, you can adapt your approach to individual situations. You prepare to negotiate, you conduct the negotiation, you finalize the agreed upon the agreement, and then you move to the final stage. Let's talk about preparing to negotiate. What I do know is that luck won't get you far at the negotiation table, and my negotiators in the audience, I'm sure, will agree. Preparing by knowing what the other side is looking for, how flexible you can be, and what you will do if you have to walk away. So you want to identify the type and the scope of the negotiation. You want to establish and improve your position by preparing. Assessing the other party's position. You learn that while you're preparing for your negotiation. And you ultimately identify the zone of possible agreement. That's what we call ZOPA. Before you begin bargaining, you need to know what kind of negotiation you are engaging in. This knowledge will influence your strategy and the choices you make. The 2 main types are single issue negotiations, also known as distributed, or a win-lose negotiation. And there's also multiple issue negotiation, also known as integrative or win-win negotiation. And you can see here by this chart, I'm hoping that you can see this here, the different characteristics of single versus multiple issue negotiation. Here we're going to identify a type of negotiation which we're calling multiple issue. In the real world, few negotiations involve only one issue. Most negotiations, as we see it, include several variables, such as delivery date, financing, contract length, or the quality of a product. While more complex than single issue negotiations, multiple issue negotiations also offer opportunities for you and the other side to create, and not just claim, but create value. Instead of competing for a bigger piece of the pie, you as the other negotiating party can decide to work together to expand and even to add to the pie. In multiple issue negotiations, you and your counterparts often make trade-offs to get things, the value out of the most things, while giving up other factors that you deem less critical. This approach means that your ability to claim what you want from the deal does not necessarily detract from your counterpart's ability to claim what they want. So I'm going to give you an example. Sasha is interviewing candidates to fill a full-time position in her department. One of her colleagues recommends Christopher. Christopher has the necessary knowledge and skills. But Sasha learns that he is looking to work part-time and his salary exceeds Sasha's budget. As Sasha talks to Christopher, she discovers that he would like to work from home several days a week. With such an agreement, Christopher is amenable to working more hours per week for a lower salary because he won't be commuting and will be getting something that he values. Sasha is successful at negotiating the deal. She gets the employee she wants for the hours and salary she's looking for, while Christopher gets the job and the ability to work from home. Let's talk about determining the scope. Another important factor to consider when preparing for a negotiation is scope. The simplest negotiation takes place between two people who meet once and either come to an agreement or walk away. In some organizations, these negotiations are rare. Most negotiations involve more than two parties and frequently take place in phases, with each phase devoted to unique issues. So what are we saying? There are usually a number of parties involved, coalitions sometimes. There's some alliances that are formed amongst groups and other influencers. There are a number of phases. Most negotiations are transactions that are implemented over time in different phases, and there are goals that need to be set. Many people assume that the goal is to obtain the best price or the most favorable term. That may be true, but there are also some other higher objectives that need to be attained as well. Establish and improve your position. Your best alternative to a negotiated agreement is what we're calling a BATNA. This is your preferred course of action in the absence of a deal. It determines the point at which you can say no to an unfavorable proposal. By knowing your BATNA before you enter into a negotiation, you can gauge whether or not a deal makes sense. Without knowing your BATNA, you might reject an offer that is actually better than an alternative you end up with. Or conversely, you might accept an offer that is less favorable than an alternative you could obtain elsewhere. The better your BATNA, the more aggressive you can be in your negotiating, because you know you have an acceptable backup plan if your talks don't produce the outcome you wish. Therefore, it's wise to improve your BATNA before and during your negotiations. You might do so by finding additional clients or vendors or try to upgrade the agreements you have with the current client or vendor. In single issue negotiations, your BATNA will usually focus on price. In multiple issue negotiations, it will include all of the factors that are important to you, such as price, schedule, fees, quantity, commissions, etc. I'm going to give you a quick example. A consultant is preparing to meet with a potential client about a month-long assignment. She is not certain what fees she'll be able to negotiate or even if she'll be able to reach a deal. Before the meeting, she determines her BATNA. She estimates the amount she could earn during the month if she were to work with other clients and determines that she could bill $15,000 a month. When she meets with a potential client, her goal is to reach an agreement that will yield at least $15,000. Always determine your walkaway position. Your walkaway position or your reservation price is the least favorable point at which you would accept a deal. If your counterpart's final proposal falls short of your walkaway position, you end the negotiation without reaching an agreement. Your walkaway position should be derived from your BATNA, but it is not necessarily the same thing. Your walkaway position should represent at least a slight improvement on your BATNA. Okay. Assessing the other party's position. The more you know about an organization and the people with whom you are negotiating, the stronger your position during the negotiation process. Find out what you can about the other side by asking questions. You want to talk to people who know the other party and research relevant websites, annual reports, and marketing materials. The information you learn can help you form personal connections, avoid misunderstandings and errors, and it can also help you plan your strategy. So in this slide, you'll see some tips here that you'll want to uncover. Find out who you're negotiating with, discover their titles and their areas of responsibility, their personalities, style, background, etc., how long they've been with the organization, their relevant experience, how they are viewed within the organization. You want to also do the same sort of research on the organization, how they're structured, what are their cultural goals and values, their business, their strengths, financial performance, etc., the value the deal has to the other side, and their objectives. How easy would it be for the organization to make an alternative deal with someone else? This is information that is usually relatively easy for us to find out today. Let's take another quick poll. How often do you take time to understand the other side's interest? Let's take a quick poll. Oh, good. Thank you. Good. So the majority of us are at least taking the time to do some of our upfront research. And I know that that's important. So good. Thank you. Next slide, please. We're still in the preparing to negotiate phase. And here we're going to identify what we call the zone of possible agreement, or ZOPA. Once you have an idea of the party's BATNA and their walkaway position, you can estimate the zone of possible agreement. This is the range in which a deal can take place. Your walkaway position determines one end of the ZOPA, and the other party's walkaway position determines the other end. Does the ZOPA exist, if at all, in the other party's walkaway position overlap between yours? Depending on how large the ZOPA is, there may be many possible agreements you could come to that would satisfy both parties. Let's look at this in an example. Two parties are negotiating the purchase price of commercial refrigeration equipment. The buyer has a set walkaway position of $275,000 and would like to pay as little as possible. The seller has a set of walkaway position of $250,000 and would like to get as much as possible. The ZOPA, therefore, is the range between the $250,000 and the $275,000. If the numbers were reversed and the buyer had a walkaway position of 250, and the seller had a walkaway position of 275, there would be no ZOPA. No agreement would be possible unless both parties were willing to consider other elements of value, such as delivery costs, service agreements, or one or both sides change their walkaway position. And you can see that here in this slide that's depicting the zone of possible agreement. It's somewhere between the 250,000 and the 275,000. Let's talk about phase two, when we're conducting negotiation, including offers and counteroffers. The way you kick off and carry out a negotiation can have a big impact on the outcome. You must first set the stage and devise your strategies for success for a successful single and multiple issue negotiation. You're going to set your tone and the stage, use prescribed strategies, and you'll continually evaluate what's happening. Setting the stage. Work with the other party to establish a process for the negotiation, whether you plan to meet in person or virtually. You agree on a time, a place, the length of time it's going to take. You establish, if you will, to meet or engage in a series of meetings. Confirm who will participate from both organizations. You decide that you will indeed keep everyone informed about the meetings and the logistics, and determine who will prepare the meeting agenda, the topics that will be discussed, and the sequence in which you'll discuss them. Getting off to a good start in negotiations can sometimes be awkward, especially if you haven't met or worked with the other party before. To ensure that you get off to a good, smooth start, here's some things that we can do. We can set a positive tone with your opening remarks, expressing respect for the other person their expertise and their experience. Frame the negotiation as a joint endeavor, and emphasize your openness to the other's concerns and their interests. Discuss your expectations regarding the process. Make sure that all the parties have a shared understanding. And also offer information. Voluntarily explain some of your interests and concerns up front. It shows good faith. If the other side does not reciprocate, be cautious in providing additional details and information. Use your strategy. In most single issue negotiations, a gain by one side represents a loss to another. You can use several tactics to achieve gains and prevent losses. Looking here at this graph. And number one, establish an anchor. Be sure the initial offer sets an acceptable bargaining range. Number two, handle unacceptable anchors. If the other party sets an unacceptable bargaining range, ask additional questions and then offer your own proposal. Number three, make concessions cautiously. Understand the implications of offering large and small concessions. You want to set a deadline. Attach an expiration date to any offer to prevent the seller from waiting for a better deal. Offering multiple proposals. Give your counterparts various options so they won't feel stuck with an ultimatum. Expand the options. Bring additional issues into the negotiation to shift the process from competitive to cooperative. Here's an example. Sanjay is a sales representative for a micropressor company. He meets with Thomas, the founder of a startup company that is developing a line of robots. Thomas wants to make an initial purchase of 1,000 micropressors. Sanjay anchors with a price of $575 per unit. The negotiation begins from this reference point. Thomas counteroffers with $525 per unit. They eventually settle on $565 per unit, with Sanjay's company assuming the shipping cost. It's better to offer an anchor when you have a strong sense of the other side's walk-away position. Your proposal should be at or around that number. Don't be too aggressive, or the other side might end the negotiation. And always be prepared to justify your offer by providing data. If your anchor is out of the negotiator's range, retreat gracefully by indicating that your initial offer isn't the final one. But be ready to explain your shift to a less aggressive proposal. If you believe the other party has more information about the item you're negotiating on or about the market and the industry, then it may be beneficial to hold off on anchoring. Try to gather more information during the discussion before making your first offer. Let's take time for one more quick poll. When negotiating, do you prefer to make the first offer? Yes, no, or it depends? Yes, no, or it depends? Okay. Looks like most of us said it depends on the negotiation and probably the factors, with just few of us saying that yes, we prefer to make the first offer. Let's take a closer look. Negotiations might seem to be linear in process of preparation, negotiation, and eventually agreement, or sometimes failure. However, some complex negotiations require a cyclical approach. New information may appear at various points. Different parties may offer concessions or heighten their demands. In these types of negotiations, you prepare and you negotiate as usual. The negotiation then produces outcomes and information that you evaluate and use to prepare for a new round of negotiations. This process continues until you reach an agreement or you decide that you have to walk away. In the final phase, this is phase 3, here we're going to look at the agreement and we want to prevent errors. We want to maintain our emotions, handle any impasses. Our goal is to close the deal, and finally to evaluate the outcome. So there's some steps that we want to take a really close look at in this phase. How do we prevent errors? Even the best prepared people can fall prey to mental errors during a negotiation, which can lead to disappointment in the outcome. There's some cognitive mistakes that can result in loss of money and time, difficult or impossible terms, can damage reputation. By understanding these errors that commonly occur in the negotiations, you can learn to avoid them or even correct them. Negotiations aren't always predictable. For example, your counterpart may be replaced or newly found opportunities may occur. You have to remain flexible and patient, be open to working with new people, and understand that change does happen. View change as an avenue for learning, creativity, and for new opportunities. For example, Gabrielle and her team were in the middle of a prolonged merger negotiating with a health company. As they closed in on finalizing an agreement, they learned that the health company's leading negotiator had suddenly left the firm. The executive team asked for time to assign a new lead negotiator. Gabrielle and her group took advantage of the delay to interview additional staff members to ensure a good fit between the merging organization's culture and capabilities. Managing your emotions, how do we do that? At one time or another, in the course of a negotiation, you likely experience very strong emotions. Some may be positive, joy, relief, that you finally settled on a sticky situation, while others, such as anger or competitiveness, can arise. They can interfere with your ability to think clearly and creatively. Knowing how to manage your emotional responses is a key negotiating skill. Finally, you are nearing the end of the agreement, and it's time to close the deal and secure a commitment. Notify the other party that you're getting ready to commit. As you get closer to the final deal, clearly say so, particularly if the other negotiator still seems to expect sizable concessions. Allow flexibility if you are not negotiating with the decision maker, the final decision maker. If the other negotiator does not have the final authority, leave some flexibility in the terms. Be prepared with one last trade you'll be willing to make in case the decision maker requests a change to the agreement. Discourage the other side from seeking further concessions. If you reach a deal that is acceptable to both of you, discourage further changes. Explain that any adjustment made in the other party's favor would have to be balanced by an adjustment in your favor, something that would reopen the entire deal. Always document the terms. A written record prevents disputes and confusion. Sometimes you and your counterpart will be able to draft the final document and agreement on your own. If you need legal counsel to do it, be sure the terms are clear during the handoff so errors are not made when the documents are created. Don't gloat, bragging about your deal and about how much more you were prepared to give up to damage future negotiations. Other parties might be more aggressive and less willing to concede to your request. There may be times when you can't reach an agreement with the other party. Although it may be painful, no deal is better than a bad deal. If you are confident of your BATNA and your walkaway position, then you know you did the right thing. Always evaluate the outcome and your performance. After the negotiation concludes, evaluate how it went so you can apply what you learned to your next negotiation. Do this immediately when the proceedings are fresh in your mind. To evaluate the outcome, compare your results to your initial goals, your BATNA and your walkaway position, the objectives and standards such as the market value, efficiency, cost, and profits. Also evaluate against expert opinions. Also consider the other negotiators' actions. Is this an organization you would want to work with again? What did your counterparts do well? What mistakes did they make? Were you well prepared? Were you missing any valuable information that you should have known when you walked into the negotiation? How well did you do when you were estimating the other side's BATNA and the ZOPA? If you weren't close, what did you miss? Could you have done anything differently that would have made this process go more smoothly? Were you able to establish a cooperative, trusting relationship with the other parties? Why or why not? Were you able to read the other party's signals and their body language? When you encountered a problem, were you able to come up with a creative solution? Also ask someone else who was in the room to provide you with some feedback. Once you gain insight on how things went, set personal developmental goals for your next negotiation. And in addition, document and share any lessons with others in your organization so they can learn from your experience. And then finally, carry out the agreement. Handle impasses, stalemates, and deadlocks. Difficult times in negotiations are to be expected. Breakdowns can be due to an impasse, a deadlock, we can't come to an agreement. Figure out which barrier you're dealing with and apply the appropriate strategy to overcome it. If there's an impasse, set aside the difficult issues and continuing to discuss. If there's a stalemate, you're talking to each other, but you just can't make any progress. Change the dynamics of the negotiation by altering one of the elements. Lack of progress can be frustrating. Bring in a neutral third party to mediate the deal. Time for another question. Which do you find easier, opening a negotiation or closing the deal? Opening the talk, closing the deal, or do you find them to be equally easy? Okay. So most of us find opening the talk to be easiest, and closing the deal, we're still right there in the middle with that one. Okay. Thank you. Fulfilling the agreement. So here's where we're going to carry out the agreement, meet our commitment, and we'll capture and share what we've learned. We're going to honor the agreements that we've made, follow through on all of our agreements, ensure that all the people in our organization responsible for executing the terms are made aware and that they also follow through. All of this information will be included in the agreement, and list any other contacts in the organization and schedules, et cetera, that are pertinent. Discover your negotiating style. Negotiating style, the profile is designed to help you determine and gain understanding of your unique individual style. Understanding your unique style will help you maximize the 4 phases of negotiation. And knowing your style can help you adjust to different situations for complete effectiveness when you're negotiating. Negotiators have interacting concerns, 2 interacting concerns: the outcome of the agreement and the relationship with the other party, the other negotiators. The outcome means the objective for which you're negotiating. Why are we here? What's the purpose for us being at the table? The relationship refers to the regard that you have for the person that's sitting at the table with you, and there are varying interests between those 2 primary concerns. And with the interacting concerns, the 2 interacting concerns, the concern for the relationship and the concern for the outcome, as they interact with one another, the outcome brings about negotiating behaviors. And in this slide, we look at how negotiating behaviors, the relationship between concern for relationship and the concern for the outcome, we look at the styles that come about as a relationship of thinking about those behaviors. The first one we're going to take a look at is defeat. When there's a high degree of concern being expressed for the outcome of a negotiation and a low degree of concern expressed for the relationship with another party, defeat is the behavior pattern produced. So if I have a defeat behavior, I'm going to drive hard for a bargain. Total victory is my only concern. My goal is to get as much as I can, and only my interest must prevail. Business is business. I'm going to be very stubborn. I'm going to dig in and insist on my own position. With this type of style, I don't trust anyone as a negotiator. Power and control mean everything to me. And I'm always looking to get as much as I can for how little I have to give up. And in my mind, there's only one winner. Withdraw. When there's a low degree of concern for both the outcome of the negotiation and the relationship with the other party, a withdrawal behavior pattern is produced. This negotiator has little interest in forging the best deal and little interest in maintaining and developing good business relationships. This produces a behavior style suggesting lack of concern for the negotiating outcomes and feelings of powerlessness. I'm indifferent and resigned to whatever happens. I don't particularly like confrontational situations, so I avoid them. Realistically, I'm going to take whatever the other person is willing to give. Other people are born negotiators. I don't see myself as one of them. I'm willing to relinquish, surrender, and yield. That's the withdrawal behavior. Accommodate. When the focus is on building a compatible relationship in the hope that the negotiation will be successful, an accommodate behavior pattern is produced. This negotiator expends minimal effort to work out the best deal. The focus is on building a friendly relationship. In the long run, in my mind, relationships pay off. This pattern is characterized by efforts to promote harmony, avoidance of substantive differences, yielding to pressure to preserve the relationship, and placing interpersonal relationships above the fairness of an outcome. So if I'm the negotiator with an accommodating behavior, I see good relationships producing good deals. My goal is to maintain harmony, keep the peace, and I'm always friendly. I'm going to avoid unpleasant confrontations, however. I'm agreeable, and I want to keep everybody happy. I'm willing to make concessions to further the relationship. However, I trust others sometimes without reservation. And I sometimes will disclose my bottom line so the other parties will know what I'm after. And I can tend to yield to pressure to preserve a relationship. Compromise. When a moderated degree of concern for both dimensions of negotiating behavior is expressed, a compromise behavior pattern is produced. This negotiator has a moderate degree of concern for both dimensions of behavior. He or she believes that some concern must be shown for the longer-term relationship with the other party, or the negotiated outcome will not be adequate. This pattern is characterized by compromise, meeting the other party halfway, looking for trade-offs, splitting the difference, and other halfway measures. This behavior, I'm willing to split the difference, meet you halfway, give something to get something. I'm always looking for trade-offs. You scratch my back, I'm going to scratch your back. You win some, you lose some is my attitude. And finally, collaborate. And there's a high degree of concern for both the outcome of the negotiation and the relationship with the other party being expressed. A collaborative behavior pattern is produced. This negotiator believes that both sets of behaviors are important. Not only is the outcome of the deal important, but building and maintaining long-term business relationships are also critical. I'm a collaborator. My goal is a win-win relationship. Both parties get their respective needs satisfied. I believe in principled negotiations, no tricks up my sleeves. Instead of dividing the apples, we both could shake the tree and get more apples. My goal is to reach a result-based and objective negotiation. Which of the 5 negotiation styles are you closest to? Let's take a quick poll here. Great. So I see the majority of us prefer to have a collaborative style of negotiation. Thank you. So which of these styles works best in various or different situations? And in this graph or this chart, you can see which style, the advantage and the disadvantage. And the one that we chose, most of us, the style of being more collaborative, the advantage would be you gain more creativity, there's some long-term solutions. The disadvantage is that it does take time to sometimes come to an agreement when you're in a collaborative mode. It takes more time and more effort. Compromise, I believe, was our second highest. Produces adequate solutions, but you don't always reach optimal solutions for yourself. How to collaborate and maintain good relationships while negotiating. We want to always keep these 6 steps in mind. Win-win means all parties go away feeling as if they have done well, given the realities of the situation. Win-win negotiations uses collaboration as opposed to confrontation as the basis for persuasion. Have both parties share what their interests are? Do your brainstorming to identify several possible solutions, and then jointly select the best solution. That's the basis of a win-win collaborative negotiation. Here's some skills of successful negotiators. Many of the skills and the methods that successful negotiators use are developed over time. And to increase your effectiveness as a negotiator, align yourself with negotiating skills and goals of your organization. Prepare yourself. Collect and analyze as much information as possible before your deliberation. Separate your personal issues from negotiation issues. Actively listen. Spend more time listening than talking, which is most important. Develop a reputation for being trustworthy. Earn trust by practicing ethical behavior. And recognize the value of relationships. Work to retain long-term relationships with your coworkers, your suppliers, and others, and always communicate openly. And it's important to admit when we've made mistakes. And ask for feedback. We come to the end. So now you can identify the various phases of negotiations. We've talked about and discovered the negotiating style that best fits you. You now should be able to look at those styles and apply them to given situations, and also how to collaborate and maintain good relationships while you're negotiating. Once again, thank you so much for joining us, for enhancing your negotiation powers. Again, we apologize for the delayed start, and I know that Sarah is going to take questions. It's a little after 3, so I don't know, Sarah, do we have time for questions?
Unfortunately, we probably do not have time for that live Q&A, but what we can do, attendees, go ahead, put those questions into the chat box, and we'll actually send those over to Tanya, and she'll answer your questions, and then we'll actually be posting that on our blog about next week. Tanya, could you just advance to the next slide, please?
Yes.
All right, one more. All right, and for attending today, we're also offering a special offer on the HRDQ product negotiating style profile. For a limited time, we are running a 25% discount off the starter kit. This is a self-assessment and classroom workshop, includes a facilitator set, 6 print assessments, and 18 observer forms. And no certification is required to be able to train. If you would like, head over to hrdqstore.com/NSP for more information. Tanya, thank you so much today. Would you just like to add any final thoughts before I go ahead and wrap up? And like you said, we apologize for that delay in the webcast when we started.
I just look forward to your questions and look forward to answering them. And in those answers, you'll have my contact information. I look forward to connecting with all of you. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Tanya. And if you want to check out more webcasts, go to HRDQ-U.com. And everybody on the line, we appreciate your time, and we hope you found today's webinar informative. Thanks all. Bye.